Hey, it's Dan O'Donnell for the MacIver Institute, and for the past few months, we've been hearing some noxious rhetoric about the Israel-Hamas conflict, almost universally coming from the pro-Palestinian side, who's been straight up lying about Israel. So now, let's debunk the 5 biggest lies about Israel, starting with
a textbook case of genocide. Israel has been explicit about what it's carrying out in Gaza. Why isn't the world listening?
Genocide. Really? Okay. It's not true. The Arab Muslim Palestinian population has nearly quintupled since the Six-Day War of 1967. It went from about 1.3 million people back then to more than 5.4 million today, and the population growth has accelerated in the past few years. It's nearly doubled from a population of 2.9 million in 2000. If Israel was really committing genocide, then it's really, really bad at it. In just the past decade, the Arab Muslim Palestinian population has increased by more than 1.3 million people, which coincidentally was the total Palestinian population back in 1967.
Because if we don't get to the root of this vicious Israeli occupation, we're going to have these cycles of hatred and violence going on and on and on.
No, Gazans are not living under occupation, and they haven't since 2005, when Israel pulled its military forces from Gaza and forced thousands of Israeli Jews from the region. Seriously. They forcibly evicted their own people and even demolished Jewish homes and businesses before turning Gaza over to the Palestinian Authority. Now, how did Palestinians celebrate their newfound autonomy? By immediately desecrating and then burning the remaining synagogues to the ground and firing rockets into Israel. A year later, the citizens of Gaza voted Hamas into power, and rocket and mortar attacks on Israel increased dramatically almost overnight.
And it's basically like living, Alex, in an open-air prison.
Okay, so maybe Gaza isn't occupied per se, but Palestinians living there are still Israeli prisoners, right? Unable to leave because of their Jewish jailers. Now, that might be believable if Israel controlled all of Gaza's borders. It doesn't. The Egyptian government controls the southern one and doesn't allow, under any circumstances, any Palestinians in their country, and it hasn't for 16 years. And no, it's not because Egypt is just doing Israel's bidding, as has been frequently suggested. In 2007, Hamas and Fatah fought a brief civil war for control of Gaza, and the Egyptian government, fearing that Hamas's ultimate victory would inspire radicals in their own country, sealed off the border. Any guesses as to which country does allow Palestinians across the border on work permits? That's right, Israel.
The condition that sustains this violence is the crime of apartheid and the apartheid system that Israel oversees, and that the United States has been the primary supporter of.
An apartheid state? Seriously? As in one in which Arab Muslim citizens don't have the same rights as Jewish ones? That type of apartheid state? It doesn't exist. Not only do Muslims have the exact same citizenship rights as Jews, Christians, Buddhists, agnostics, and everyone else, there are currently 10 Arab Muslims in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. A Muslim was just appointed to Israel's Supreme Court. Israel doesn't just allow Arab Muslim political parties. One of them, the United Arab List, was recently a part of the country's governing coalition. Name me another apartheid state that would allow that.
Until there is an independent Palestinian state, there is not going to be peace or security in that region.
If Palestinians really did just want their own state, they wouldn't have rejected one every single time it was offered to them. And the reason each time? Israel was still allowed to exist. So much for a two-state solution, huh? In the 1930s, when the British controlled the region, 2 separate plans called for Palestinian statehood, but were rejected by the Mufti of Jerusalem because those plans would also create a Jewish state. The Mufti again rejected an original United Nations partition plan of 1947 that would have granted Palestinians an even bigger state, because it also created the State of Israel. Instead, the Palestinians joined 6 Muslim nations in immediately attacking the new State of Israel once it was formed. After the Arab-Israeli War of 1967, UN Resolution 242 called for a complete Israeli withdrawal of all Palestinian territories, creating a Palestinian state, but the Palestinian Liberation Authority, the PLO, like the Mufti before them, rejected this. The Oslo Accords of 1993 and 1995 also failed to produce a Palestinian state, largely because of Hamas terror attacks that effectively ended the negotiations. And even when Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak offered massive new territorial concessions and a new Palestinian state at the Camp David summit in 2000, PLO leader Yasser Arafat rejected it. 7 years later, Barak tried again, even offering more land than the previous deal. But even though Arafat was gone, his stubbornness remained in his new Palestinian counterpart, Mahmoud Abbas, who rejected it. It's safe to conclude that Palestinian leadership doesn't actually want their own state if an Israeli state is allowed to exist as well. But despite their lies about apartheid and genocide and the like, now you know the truth about the 5 biggest lies told about Israel. For the MacIver Institute, I'm Dan O'Donnell.